The morning Earth received its death sentence, Lee Do-hyun was fixing a broken coffee machine on Luna Station. He hummed quietly while working, his worn jumpsuit stained with grease and his dark hair messy from crawling through maintenance shafts. All night. The machine sparked once, then started brewing perfectly. Do-hyun smiled and patted its side like an old friend. Another victory for human engineering, he said to himself. 3 levels below, in the station's main conference room, every world leader was screaming at each other through holographic displays. The message had arrived 6 hours ago, broadcast simultaneously to every human settlement in the solar system. The voice had been cold and mechanical, speaking perfect English. People of Earth, you have violated the territorial boundaries of the Velian Empire. By ancient law, you have 7 standard days to present a champion for the right of bonding. If no acceptable candidate is found, your species will be eliminated. This is not negotiable. President Park Soo-min of the United Earth Alliance rubbed her temples. Around the table, military commanders argued with diplomats while scientists frantically searched their databases for any mention of the Velian Empire. "We found something," announced Dr. Chen Wei, Earth's leading xenobiologist. His face was pale. "Deep space telescopes detected massive energy signatures moving toward our system. Whatever these Velians are, they have ships the size of small moons." General Morrison slammed his fist on the table. "Then we fight. Humanity doesn't bow to alien threats." "With what?" Dr. Chen pulled up star charts showing the approaching fleet. "Our best warships are like insects compared to these vessels. We're talking about a civilization that spans multiple galaxies." President Park stood up. "What exactly is this rite of bonding?" "Unknown. Our computers found references in some ancient Earth legends, but nothing concrete. It seems to involve selecting a representative to undergo some kind of trial or ceremony. Then we send our best," the president decided. "Gather candidates immediately. Military heroes, Olympic champions, Nobel Prize winners, anyone who represents the peak of human achievement." Far above this chaos, Do-hyun finished his repairs and headed to the station's observation deck for his lunch break. Luna Station orbited Earth's moon, giving him a perfect view of his home planet. The blue marble turned slowly beneath him, peaceful and beautiful. His friend Park Min-ho found him there 20 minutes later, looking worried and excited at the same time. "Do-hyun, you heard the news, right?" Min-ho sat down beside him with a dramatic sigh. "Aliens are coming to destroy us all." "I heard something about it." Do-hyun unwrapped his sandwich. "Sounds serious." "Serious. We're talking about the end of humanity here." Min-ho waved his hands around wildly. "They want us to send a champion for some alien ritual. The governments are going crazy trying to find the perfect candidate." Do-hyun took a bite of his sandwich and chewed thoughtfully. "What kind of champion?" "Nobody knows. That's the problem. They've been testing people all day with some weird alien device that showed up in every major city. So far, everyone gets rejected. War heroes, genius scientists, Olympic athletes, even that guy who won the global chess championship 5 years running. The machine just sits there doing nothing." Do-hyun watched a supply ship dock with the station. "Maybe they're looking for something different." "Like what?" "I don't know. Maybe they don't want someone who thinks they're special." Min-ho laughed. "Right. So they want someone ordinary, someone like you, I suppose." "Maybe." "Ha! You should volunteer then. I dare you." Do-hyun looked at his friend with mild surprise. "You're serious?" "Why not? If the greatest minds on Earth can't figure this out, maybe they need a different approach. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? The machine says no, and you go back to fixing coffee makers. And if it says yes, then you save humanity and become the most famous person in history." Do-hyun finished his sandwich and stood up. "Okay?" "Okay what?" "I'll do it." Min-ho's jaw dropped. "I was joking." "I know, but you're right. Maybe they need someone different. Do-hyun headed toward the transport bay. Besides, I've always wanted to see what alien technology looks like up close. 2 hours later, Do-hyun stood in a line of candidates at Earth's primary spaceport. In front of him waited Admiral Sarah Chen, holder of 3 Medals of Honor. Behind him stood Dr. Kim Ji-soo, who had discovered the cure for cancer. Everyone looked nervous except Do-hyun, who seemed more curious than worried. The alien device sat in the center of the testing chamber. It was a smooth black crystal about the size of a person, floating 3 feet off the ground. Strange symbols glowed along its surface, pulsing with soft blue light. One by one, candidates approached the crystal. Each time, they would stand before it for exactly 30 seconds while the symbols flickered and changed colors. Then the light would fade, and they would be politely asked to leave. Admiral Chen stepped forward. The crystal's light grew brighter, symbols spinning faster. For a moment, it seemed like something might happen. Then the light dimmed to its usual soft blue glow. "Next candidate," announced the official. Dr. Kim approached with confidence. The crystal barely reacted to her presence. She frowned and tried touching it, but nothing changed. "Next candidate." Do-hyun walked up to the crystal with his hands in his pockets, looking like he was about to examine a broken engine. The symbols immediately began spinning wildly. Blue light became white, then gold, then every color imaginable. The crystal rose higher into the air, humming with energy. Everyone in the room stepped back except Do-hyun, who tilted his head and studied the swirling patterns with professional interest. "Fascinating," he said quietly. "The energy flow is completely different from human technology, much more elegant." The crystal pulsed once, twice, then erupted in brilliant light that filled the entire chamber. When the glow faded, Do-hyun was gone. He found himself standing in a vast metal corridor that stretched beyond sight in both directions. The walls were covered in the same flowing symbols he'd seen on the crystal, but now they moved like living things, telling stories he couldn't understand. "Welcome, human." Do-hyun turned toward the voice. At the end of the corridor stood a figure that took his breath away. She was tall and graceful, with silver skin that seemed to glow from within, and violet eyes that held the weight of centuries. Her long hair moved like liquid starlight, and she wore robes that looked like they were cut from the fabric of space itself. This was Empress Nithara, ruler of the Velian Empire, though Do-hyun didn't know that yet. All he knew was that she was the most beautiful and terrifying being he'd ever seen. "You are not what I expected," she said, her voice carrying authority that could command galaxies. Do-hyun bowed politely, the way his grandmother had taught him. "I'm Lee Do-hyun. I'm a maintenance engineer from Luna Station, and you have the most amazing ship I've ever seen." For the first time in 300 years, Empress Nithara was completely speechless. Empress Nithara stared at the human who had just complimented her ship. In 999 years of ruling the Velian Empire, no one had ever spoken to her with such casual friendliness. Warriors bowed and trembled. Diplomats spoke, in careful, respectful tones. Even her closest advisors maintained proper distance. This human looked at her like she was a neighbor he'd just met. "You find my vessel impressive?" she asked, regaining her composure. Do-hyun nodded enthusiastically. "The energy distribution system alone must be incredible. How do you power something this size without creating heat-dead zones? And those symbols on the walls, are they some kind of living computer interface?" Nithara blinked slowly. "You wish to discuss engineering?" "Well, yes. I'm here for whatever this bonding ritual is, but I've never seen technology like this. On Earth, our biggest ships need massive cooling systems and constant maintenance. This place feels alive." "It is alive, in a sense." The words slipped out before Nithara could stop them. She never explained Velian technology to outsiders. "The ship grows rather than being built. We cultivate it like a plant." "That's amazing." Do-hyun's eyes lit up. "Biomechanical fusion? We've theorized about it but never achieved stable integration. How do you prevent rejection between organic and mechanical components?" For the first time in decades, Nythera found herself wanting to answer a question about something other than politics or war. She caught herself and straightened her shoulders. "Captain, Kim Ji-woo will show you to your quarters. You will be prepared for the ceremony." She turned to leave, but Do-hyun's voice stopped her. "Your Majesty?" She looked back, surprised he knew the proper title. "Thank you for not destroying Earth while you waited for someone to qualify. That was kind of you." Nythera felt something strange happen in her chest, a warmth she hadn't experienced in centuries. She left without responding, confusion clouding her ancient mind. Captain Kim Ji-woo appeared moments later. She was human, though she wore Velian military uniform with easy familiarity. Her black hair was streaked with premature gray, and her dark eyes held wisdom earned through hard experience. "You're Korean," Do-hyun said with surprise. "Born in Seoul 52 years ago," Ji-woo replied in Korean, then switched back to English. "I was Earth's first ambassador to the Velian Empire. I chose to stay." "Why?" "Because out here, humanity isn't just one small planet trying to survive. It's part of something bigger." She gestured for him to follow her down the corridor. "The Empress was right to be surprised by you. The bonding crystal has rejected over 10,000 candidates from dozens of species over the past century. They walked through passages that seemed to breathe with soft light. Other Velians moved past them, tall and graceful with their silver skin and flowing robes. Most ignored Do-hyun completely, but a few watched him with curious eyes. "What exactly is this bonding ritual?" Do-hyun asked. "Something that hasn't been completed in over 300 years, Ji-woo said carefully. "The Empress will explain when she's ready." His quarters were larger than his entire apartment back on Luna Station. The walls showed a view of space that changed slowly, displaying different star systems and nebulae. A bed that looked like it was carved from a single piece of crystal dominated one corner, while the other held what appeared to be a workbench covered in unknown tools. "Dinner is at the 8th bell," Ji-woo said. "Try not to embarrass our species too badly." Alone, Do-hyun explored his new environment. The workbench fascinated him most. The tools seemed designed for delicate work, and several partially completed. Devices lay scattered across its surface. One looked like a music box, another resembled a small telescope. He was examining what appeared to be a broken energy regulator when the 8th bell chimed through the ship. The dining hall was enormous, with a crystal table that could seat 100 people. Only a dozen Valians were present, seated at one end with Empress Nythera at the head. They all wore elaborate robes and spoke in low, serious voices about Empire business. Do-hyun sat in the chair indicated for him, directly to the Empress's right. The conversation stopped immediately. "Continue," Nythera commanded. "Discuss the mining disputes on Kepler-7. As her advisors resumed talking, Do-hyun studied the food before him. It was beautiful, arranged like art on plates that seemed to be made of compressed starlight. He tried each dish carefully, making appreciative sounds when something tasted good. "You find our cuisine acceptable?" Nythera asked quietly. "It's incredible. This blue stuff tastes like music sounds, if that makes sense. And this?" He held up something that looked like crystallized fruit. "It changes flavor as you chew it." "Temporal berries. They exist in several time streams simultaneously. That's impossible according to human physics. Human physics are limited." Do-hyun laughed. "True. We're still figuring out basic stuff like faster-than-light travel." One of the advisors, a stern-faced Velian with golden eyes, spoke up. "Perhaps the human could enlighten us about Earth's pathetic attempt at space expansion?" The comment was clearly meant as an insult, but Do-hyun just nodded seriously. "Oh, we're terrible at it. Took us 3 tries just to build a stable moon base. Our first Mars colony failed because nobody remembered to account for dust storms in the water recycling system. He told the story with such genuine humor that several Velians smiled despite themselves. Even Nithara's lips curved slightly upward. But that's how humans learn, Do-Yun continued. We fail spectacularly, then try again with better ideas. My grandfather used to say that humans don't solve problems elegantly. We just try every possible solution until something works. An inefficient approach, the golden-eyed advisor said. Maybe, but it means we never give up. Do-Hyun took another bite of temporal berries. Even when things seem impossible. After dinner, Nithara walked with him back toward his quarters. The corridors were quieter now, lit by softer light for the ship's night cycle. Your species is unusual, she said. How so? Most civilizations become more cautious as they advance. They avoid risks, preserve what they have built. Humans seem to embrace uncertainty. Well, we're still pretty new at this whole space thing. Maybe we'll get more careful as we get older. Nithara stopped walking. I hope not. Something in her voice made Do-Hyun look at her more carefully. For just a moment, the mask of imperial authority slipped, and he saw something else underneath. Loneliness, perhaps, or longing for something she couldn't name. Your Majesty? Are you all right? The mask snapped back into place immediately. I am perfectly well. Good night, human. She left him standing in the corridor, but not before he caught something that shocked him completely. The ancient, terrifying Empress of the Velian Empire was blushing. Back in her private chambers, Nithara stared at her reflection in a mirror, made of frozen starlight. Her silver cheeks still showed traces of color, something that hadn't happened since she was barely a century old. Impossible, she whispered to herself. But her reflection smiled back at her, and for the first time in 300 years, Empress Nithara went to sleep with warmth in her heart. 3 days passed aboard the Eternal Throne, and Empress Nithara found herself doing something she hadn't done in centuries, looking forward to meals. Do-Yun had developed a habit of arriving early to the dining hall, not to eat, but to help the kitchen staff with broken equipment. Word had spread through the ship that the human could fix anything, and Velians began bringing him their personal devices. The energy flow is blocked here, he explained to a young engineer named Kira, pointing to a damaged data tablet. See how the crystal matrix is cracked. On Earth, we'd replace the whole unit, but you can actually heal this if you apply the right frequency. Nithara watched from the doorway as he worked. His hands moved with careful precision, and his face showed pure concentration. When the tablet flickered back to life, Kira smiled with genuine joy. Thank you, Do-Hyun. My grandmother's songs were stored in here. I thought they were lost forever. Music should never be lost, he replied simply. It connects us to who we are. That evening, instead of returning to her imperial chambers after dinner, Nithara found herself walking with Do-Hyun through the ship's quieter sections. Captain Jiwoo told me you have a workshop, she said. Would you like to see mine? Do-Hyun's eyes lit up. You have a workshop? She led him through passages he hadn't seen before, deeper into the ship's heart. They passed through several security barriers that recognized her immediately until they reached a door marked with symbols that seemed to shift and flow. No one else comes here, Nithara said quietly. This is my private space. The room beyond was breathtaking. Workbenches lined the walls, covered with half-finished inventions that glowed with soft inner light. Star charts floated in the air, showing systems Do-Yun had never dreamed of. In one corner, a small garden grew under artificial starlight, tended by mechanical creatures no bigger than his thumb. You built all this? He asked in wonder. Over the centuries, yes. Ruling an empire requires creativity as well as strength. I design new technologies, solve problems that my advisors cannot. Do-hyun approached one of the workbenches where something that looked like a mechanical flower was taking shape. This is incredible. The detail work alone must take months. Years, Nythera corrected. Time moves differently when you live as long as I have. She watched him examine her creations with the same careful attention he gave everything else. Most people who saw her workshop focused on its obvious power or value. Do-hyun seemed more interested in understanding how things worked. This device, here, he pointed to something that resembled a music box crossed with a telescope. What does it do? Nythera hesitated. It shows memories, moments from the past that you wish to see again. That's beautiful. Do you use it often? No, she said quietly. Some memories are too painful to revisit. They spent the next hour discussing engineering principles and design philosophy. Nythera found herself explaining techniques she'd never shared with anyone, while Do-hyun described human approaches to problem-solving that fascinated her with their creative chaos. On Earth, he said, we have a saying, if it's stupid but it works, it's not stupid. Sometimes the ugliest solution is the most effective one. Velian philosophy emphasizes elegance and perfection. Nothing wrong with that, but sometimes perfect. Is the enemy of good enough? As they talked, Nythera realized she was relaxing in a way she hadn't experienced in centuries. Her imperial posture softened, her voice lost its commanding edge, and she found herself genuinely curious about this. Strange human's perspective on everything. May I ask you something personal? Do-hyun said eventually. Nythera tensed slightly. You may ask. Captain Jiwoo mentioned you haven't completed a bonding ritual in over 300 years. What happened? The question hit like a physical blow. Nythera turned away, her silver skin growing pale. That is not a subject I discuss. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you, but the damage was done. The warmth between them evaporated as Nythera rebuilt her emotional barriers. Perhaps you should return to your quarters. Do-hyun stood to leave, then stopped. Your Majesty? Whatever happened, I'm sorry you went through it alone. After he left, Nythera stared at the memory device for a long time. Finally, her hands moved, almost by themselves, activating the machine. Images appeared in the air above it, a younger version of herself, laughing with genuine joy. Beside her stood a tall Velian with kind eyes and gentle hands. Prince Kael'thon, her first bondmate, the love of her youth. The images shifted, showing their bonding ceremony, their shared dreams of building a better empire together. Then came the darker memories, the rebellion, the war, the day she held his broken body in her arms as he died defending their people. I loved once, she whispered to the empty room. I loved, and it destroyed everything. The next morning brought chaos. Alarms rang throughout the ship as red lights flashed in the corridors. Do-hyun was eating breakfast when Captain Jiwoo burst into the dining hall. Rebel attack, she announced. All non-essential personnel to emergency stations. Through the great windows, Do-hyun could see smaller ships firing energy weapons at the Eternal Throne. The massive vessel's shields absorbed most of the damage, but some shots were getting through. Who's attacking? He asked. Separatists. They want to overthrow the Empress and break up the Empire. Jiwoo grabbed his arm. Come on, I'll get you. Somewhere safe. But as they ran through the corridors, an explosion rocked the ship. A section of the wall collapsed, trapping Jiwoo under heavy debris. She was alive, but badly hurt. Go, she gasped. Find the Empress. The rebels, they're not just trying to damage the ship. They're coming aboard. Do-hyun ran through passages that shook with each impact. Emergency lights cast strange shadows, and he could hear the sound of fighting somewhere ahead. He reached the main command center just as the doors burst open. 3 rebel soldiers in dark armor stormed in, weapons raised. At the center of the room, Empress Nithara stood alone, her advisors having fled or fallen. She faced the attackers, with calm dignity, even as blood ran from a cut on her forehead. "Surrender, old woman," the lead rebel snarled. "Your time is over. My empire will survive long after you are forgotten," Nithara replied coldly. The rebel raised his weapon to fire. Without thinking, Do-yun grabbed a broken piece of equipment and threw it as hard as he could. It struck the rebel's arm, spoiling his aim. The energy blast missed Nithara by inches. "Human," she gasped. "Sorry I'm late," Do-yun said, moving to stand beside her. "Looks like you could use some help." The rebels laughed. "2 against 3? And one of them is just a weak human?" Do-yun smiled. "You know what humans are really good at?" "Improvising." He pressed several buttons on a nearby control panel, not knowing what they did but hoping for something useful. The room's artificial. Gravity reversed suddenly, sending the rebels floating toward the ceiling in confusion. "Now!" Do-yun shouted. Nithara reacted instantly, using her natural grace to push off the floor and disable the floating rebels with precise strikes. Within moments, all 3 attackers were unconscious and drifting helplessly. As the gravity returned to normal, Nithara and Do-yun fell back to the floor together. For a moment, they lay there breathing heavily, looking at each other. "You saved my life," she said softly. "You saved mine, too. That was amazing fighting." Without thinking, Nithara reached out and touched his face, her silver fingers tracing the line of his cheek. "You could have been killed. So could you." They were very close now. Close enough that Do-hyun could see the violet depths of her eyes. Close enough that she could feel the warmth of his human skin. "I haven't let anyone this close in 300 years, she whispered. "Maybe it's time," he whispered back. Something electric passed between them, a connection deeper than words. The air around them began to shimmer with golden light as the bonding process started on its own, responding to their emotional connection. For just a moment, their minds touched. Do-hyun felt the weight of centuries, the loneliness of absolute power, the fear of loving and losing again. Nithara experienced human warmth, the simple joy of helping others, the stubborn optimism that refused to give up hope. Then the moment passed, leaving them both changed forever. The golden light faded, leaving Do-hyun and Nithara staring at each other in the damaged command center. Something fundamental had changed between them. The brief mental connection had opened doors that had been locked for centuries. "What just happened?" Do-hyun asked, still feeling echoes of her memories in his mind. "The bonding has begun," Nithara said quietly. "It cannot be stopped now." Over the following days, the changes became obvious to everyone aboard the Eternal Throne. Empress Nithara smiled more often. She asked about crew members by name and showed interest in problems that had nothing to do with politics or war. During meals, she laughed at Do-hyun's stories about life on Earth. The transformation worried her advisors greatly. "She is becoming weak," Lord Chancellor Vextar whispered to his allies in a private meeting. "This human infection is destroying everything that made her strong." Vextar was an ancient Velian with cold eyes and a calculating mind. He had served the Empire for 5 centuries, always placing duty above emotion. The sight of his Empress holding hands with a human filled him with disgust. "The bonding process is making her vulnerable," agreed Admiral Kethlar. "Her enemies will see this as an opportunity to strike. Then we must act before it progresses further," Vextar decided, "for the good of the Empire." Meanwhile, on Earth, similar conversations were taking place in government buildings around the world. "Our intelligence suggests Do-hyun is being manipulated," reported General Morrison to President Park. "No human could resist alien mind control techniques. We have to assume he's been compromised." Dr. Lee Minji, Do-hyun's younger sister, stood up from her chair. "With respect, General, you don't know my brother. He's the most stubborn person alive. If he's staying with these aliens, it's because he wants to. Dr. Lee, I understand your emotional attachment, but we must consider the possibility that your brother is no longer acting of his own free will. Minji's eyes flashed with anger. My brother volunteered for this mission when everyone else was too scared. He's probably the reason Earth still exists. Show him some respect. President Park raised her hand for silence. The question is what we do now. Our long-range sensors show the alien fleet hasn't moved against us, which suggests the bonding process is working. But we need to understand what's really happening up there. I propose a rescue mission, General Morrison said. Extract Do-hyun before the aliens complete whatever they're doing to him. And risk starting a war with a civilization that could destroy us in minutes? Minji shook her head. That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Dr. Lee, you're out of line. No, General, you're out of line. You're so focused on military solutions that you can't see what's actually happening. For the first time in human history, we have a chance at peaceful contact with an advanced alien species, and you want to throw it away because you're afraid. The room fell silent. Finally, President Park spoke. We'll send a diplomatic mission. Dr. Lee, you'll lead it. Your job is to assess the situation and report back. If your brother is truly acting freely, we respect his choice. If not, we'll extract him. Aboard the Eternal Throne, Do-hyun was unaware of the political storms brewing around him. He spent his days working alongside Velian engineers, learning their technology while teaching them human approaches to problem solving. The bonding process had accelerated their emotional connection. He could sense Nithara's presence even when she was on the other side of the ship. More importantly, he could feel her gradual healing from centuries of loneliness. But the connection worked both ways. Nithara experienced his memories of family dinners, childhood laughter, and the simple joy of fixing something broken. These human emotions were foreign to her, but increasingly precious. Your species experiences happiness so easily, she said, one evening as they walked through her garden. Even small things bring you joy. That's one of our better qualities, Do-hyun agreed. We don't need much to be content. Good food, friends to share it with, useful work to do. Simple stuff. I had forgotten that life could be simple. They stopped beside a fountain that played music as the water fell. Nithara had designed it herself centuries ago, but had rarely listened to its song. Do-hyun, she said carefully, there is something you must understand about our bonding. Once complete, it cannot be broken. We will be connected for the rest of our lives. For you, that means several decades. For me, it could be millennia. Are you asking if I'm sure about this? I am telling you that you still have time to leave. Return to Earth. Live a normal human life. Find someone of your own species to love. Do-hyun took her silver hands in his human ones. Nithara, I've seen inside your mind. I know what you've been through. How long you've been alone. I'm not going anywhere. Tears formed in her violet eyes. You do not understand the burden you are accepting. Maybe not completely, but I understand that you need someone who chooses to stay, not someone who's forced to. I choose you. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Ji-woo, her arm still in a healing cast from the rebel attack. Empress, we have a situation. Lord Chancellor Vextar is requesting an immediate audience. He's brought several high-ranking officials with him. Nithara's expression hardened instantly. Very well. Summon them to the throne room. The throne room was the most impressive chamber on the ship, designed to intimidate visitors and remind them of the Empire's power. Nithara sat on a crystal seat that floated above the floor, her imperial robes flowing around her like liquid starlight. Vextar entered with 5 other advisors, all wearing formal ceremonial dress. They bowed precisely, but their eyes were cold. Your Imperial Majesty, Vextar began, we come before you with grave concerns about the Empire's future. Speak plainly, Chancellor. The bonding process has compromised your judgment. This human has infected you with alien emotions that cloud your reasoning. For the safety of our people, we must ask you to terminate the bonding and release the human back to his species. Nithara's voice became deadly quiet. You question my judgment? We question the influence of an alien mind on our sovereign. The Empress we have served for centuries would never show such weakness. Weakness? Nithara stood up, her presence filling the room with barely controlled power. You mistake growth for weakness, Chancellor. I have ruled through fear for 900 years. Perhaps it is time to try something different. Respectfully, Your Majesty, emotion has no place in imperial decisions. Send the human away before this contamination spreads further. Do-hyun had been standing quietly beside the throne, but now he stepped forward. Lord Chancellor, may I say something? Vextar looked at him with obvious disgust. You have no voice? In imperial matters, human. Actually, according to the rite of bonding, he does, Nithara said firmly. Speak, Do-hyun. I understand your concerns about outside influence, but I've been inside the Empress's mind. I've seen her thoughts and memories. The person sitting on that throne is the same brilliant, dedicated ruler she's always been. The only difference is that now she remembers what she's fighting to protect. Pretty words, Vextar sneered. But we have reports that Earth's government is sending ships to retrieve you. When they arrive, will you go willingly? Or will you force our Empress to choose between you and avoiding a war? Do-hyun felt his heart sink. He hadn't known about Earth's plans, but he should have expected them. Nithara's face went pale. Is this true? I don't know, Do-hyun said honestly. But if it is, I won't let it start a war. I'll go with them. You see? Vextar said triumphantly. Even the human knows this alliance is impossible. End the bonding now, before it causes more damage. For a long moment, the throne room was silent. Nithara stared at Do-hyun, and he could feel her internal struggle through their connection. Finally, she spoke. Very well. Prepare a ship to return, the human to his people. The bonding will be terminated. Your Majesty, Do-hyun started, but she held up her hand. The decision is made. Captain Jiwoo will escort you to the departure bay tomorrow morning. That night, Do-hyun couldn't sleep. He paced his quarters, feeling Nithara's anguish through their fading connection. She was trying to protect him the only way she knew how, by pushing him away. But he had learned something important during his time among the Velians. Sometimes, the stupidest plan was the only one that might work. By morning, he had made his choice. The departure ceremony was scheduled for midday, but Do-hyun never showed up. Captain Jiwoo found his quarters empty except for a note written in his careful handwriting. Gone to fix something that's broken. Don't worry. At the same time, alarms began blaring throughout the Eternal Throne. Lord Chancellor Vextar rushed to the command center, where technicians were frantically checking their systems. What's happening? He demanded. Someone has accessed the ship's central core, reported a young engineer. They're making changes to our navigation and communication systems. Impossible. Only the Empress has that level of access. Sir, the access codes being used belong to Maintenance Protocol 7. It's a human signature. Vextar's face turned dark with rage. Find that human immediately. Deep within the ship's living heart, Do-hyun worked with steady concentration. The Eternal Throne's core was beautiful beyond description, a chamber filled with flowing energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. Crystal pathways carried information throughout the massive vessel, and biomechanical interfaces grew like trees from the walls. He had spent days learning the ship's systems, and now he put that knowledge to use. His plan was simple and completely insane, which made it perfectly human. Computer, he said to the ship's intelligence, I need you to broadcast a message on all frequencies to every ship in this system. That action requires Imperial authorization. the ship replied in its musical voice. Override code, bonding protocol Alpha. The Empress granted me access to all ship systems as her chosen partner. There was a pause. Override accepted. Preparing system-wide broadcast. Do-hyun took a deep breath. This is Lee Do-hyun, speaking from the Velian ship Eternal Throne. I'm addressing both the Earth diplomatic fleet that just arrived and every Velian in this system. I have something to say about love, duty, and the future of both our species. His words went out across space, reaching the 3 Earth ships that had emerged from hyperspace an hour earlier. On the lead vessel, Dr. Minji Lee listened with growing amazement as her brother's voice filled the bridge. 9 days ago, I was just a guy who fixed coffee machines. Now I'm bonded to the most powerful person in the galaxy. But here's the thing. She's not powerful because she rules an empire. She's powerful because she cares about every single being under her protection. On the Eternal Throne, Empress Nithara burst into the core chamber, followed by her guards. She stopped short when she saw Do-hyun standing calmly among the ship's energy flows, completely unharmed by forces that should have killed any organic being. "The ship is protecting him," whispered one of the guards in amazement. "For centuries," Do-hyun continued his broadcast. "Both our peoples have been taught that strength comes from standing alone. Humans think we have to prove ourselves worthy of respect. Velians believe emotion makes them weak. Both ideas are wrong." Nithara stepped forward, and Do-hyun turned to face her. Their eyes met across the pulsing chamber. "I've seen inside the mind of someone who's lived for nearly 1,000 years, he said, speaking to her as much as to his broadcast audience. "I've felt the weight of responsibility for billions of lives, and I've learned that the strongest person I know isn't strong because she doesn't feel fear or loneliness or doubt. She's strong because she feels all those things and still chooses to protect others." "Do-hyun," Nithara whispered, tears flowing down her silver cheeks. "The bonding between our species isn't contamination or weakness, it's evolution. It's 2 different kinds of strength combining to create something better than either could achieve alone." Lord Chancellor Vextar arrived with more guards, his face twisted with fury. "Seize him! End this transmission!" But the ship's defenses activated, creating a barrier of energy around Do-hyun. "I cannot permit harm to the bonded partner," the ship announced. "His genetic pattern is now integrated with the Empress's life force." "Your Majesty," Vextar turned to Nithara, "order the ship to comply." Nithara looked at Do-hyun, then at her Chancellor, and finally at the flowing energy that connected her ship's heart to every system. A slow smile spread across her face. "No," she said simply. "What?" "I said no, Chancellor. In fact, I'm relieving you of your position. Guards, escort Lord Vextar to detention. He is charged with attempting to override Imperial decisions." As Vextar was dragged away, still shouting protests, Nithara walked through the energy barrier to stand beside Do-hyun. "You magnificent, impossible human," she said softly. "Do you realize what you've just done?" "Probably started a revolution," he admitted. "But sometimes that's what the universe needs." She took his hand, and together they faced the communication array. "This is Empress Nithara. I am speaking to representatives of both our peoples. The human Do-hyun speaks truth. For too long we have ruled through fear and isolation. No more." Her words sent shockwaves through the Velian fleet. On dozens of ships, crew members looked at each other with new understanding. Many had privately questioned the Empire's harsh policies, but had never dared speak up. "Effective immediately," Nithara continued, "the Velian Empire will begin transitioning from absolute rule to cooperative governance. We will seek partnerships with other species based on mutual respect rather than conquest." On the Earth ships, Dr. Minji Lee found herself crying as she listened to her brother's impossible dream becoming reality. But the revolution wasn't without opposition. Admiral Kethlar rallied loyalist forces and declared Nithara unfit to rule. 3 Velian battlecruisers moved to attack the Eternal Throne. So much for peaceful change, Do-hyun muttered as weapons fire lit up the space around them. Some minds change slowly, Nithara replied, but she was smiling. Fortunately, we have allies. On screens throughout the ship, they watched as other Velian vessels moved to defend their Empress. The crew of the Eternal Throne worked with new enthusiasm, inspired by their ruler's courage to choose love over fear. The battle was brief but decisive. When Admiral Kethlar realized that most of the fleet stood with Nithara, he surrendered rather than cause more bloodshed. "Revolution complete," Do-hyun said with satisfaction. "The revolution is just beginning," Nithara corrected him. "Now comes the hard part, building something better." She was right. Over the following weeks, representatives from dozens of worlds arrived to negotiate new relationships with the transformed Velian Empire. Earth sent its best diplomats, led by Dr. Minji Lee, who immediately liked Nithara despite her initial skepticism. "My brother always was good at impossible projects," Minji told the Empress during their first private meeting. "But this might be his masterpiece." "He changed everything," Nithara agreed, "including me." The bonding process completed naturally as their emotional connection deepened. They could feel each other's thoughts and emotions, sharing strength during difficult negotiations and joy during quiet moments together. But their greatest challenge still lay ahead, proving to 2 galaxy-spanning civilizations that love could be stronger than fear and that unity was possible without conquest. The future remained unwritten, but for the first time in centuries, it felt full of hope. 1 year later, the wedding of Empress Nithara and Lee Do-hyun was broadcast across 3 galaxies. The ceremony took place on New Unity, a planet that had been built specifically for the occasion. Half the architecture was human, with simple lines and practical beauty. The other half was Velian, flowing and organic like living crystal. Together, they created something neither species could have imagined alone. Do-hyun stood at the altar wearing formal robes that combined Earth's best tailoring with Velian energy weaving. He looked nervous but happy, occasionally glancing at the crowd of thousands gathered to witness history. When Nithara appeared, the assembled guests fell silent. She wore a gown that seemed to be made from captured starlight flowing around her, like liquid silver. But the most remarkable thing was her expression. Pure joy, unmarked by the cold dignity she had worn for centuries. "You look beautiful," Do-hyun whispered as she joined him. "You look terrified," she replied with a smile. "Little bit. There are a lot of people watching. Just focus on me." The ceremony was conducted by Captain Ji-woo, who had been ordained for the occasion. She spoke in both English and Velian, her words carrying across space to billions of viewers. "Today we witness the joining of 2 hearts, 2 minds, and 2 civilizations," she began. "This union represents more than love between individuals. It is proof that differences can become strengths when approached with open minds and willing hearts." President Park Soo-min of Earth stood in the front row, next to High Chancellor Kim Myong, Vextar's democratically elected replacement. Both leaders had worked tirelessly over the past year to build the new alliance between their peoples. The vows they exchanged were simple but powerful. "I promise to stand beside you through whatever challenges come," Do-hyun said, his voice carrying clearly across the crowd. "To share your burdens and multiply your joys, to be your partner in building a better future for all our peoples." Nithara's voice was steady and sure. "I promise to trust in our bond when fear whispers that love is weakness, to choose hope over despair, unity over isolation, to rule not as an empress, but as a servant of all who call this galaxy home." When they kissed, the energy of their completed bond created a visible aurora that danced across New Unity's sky. The crowd erupted in cheers that echoed across the planet. But the real celebration began at the reception, where humans and Velians mingled freely for the first time in history. Dr. Minji Lee found herself in deep conversation with Velian scientists about collaborative research projects. Earth's engineers traded ideas with their alien counterparts about improving faster-than-light travel. "This is what the future looks like," Do-Yun said to his new wife as they watched their guests dancing to music that blended human jazz with Velian harmony crystals. "It's messy," Nythera observed. "Chaotic. Unpredictable." Perfect, in other words. She laughed, a sound that still amazed everyone who heard it. The Ice Empress had become someone who laughed easily and often, especially when her husband was being ridiculous. The first real test of their new alliance came 6 months later, when the Zephyrian Collective launched an unprovoked attack on a human colony world. The Zephyrians were a warrior species that viewed the human-Velian alliance as a threat to their own expansion plans. "We cannot let this aggression stand," declared Admiral Morrison during an emergency war council aboard the Eternal Throne. "The colony of New Shanghai has been completely destroyed. Retaliation will only escalate the conflict," argued High Chancellor Kim. "We should seek diplomatic solutions." "With respect," said Dr. Minji Lee, "you can't negotiate with people who open conversations by bombing civilians." Do-Hyun and Nythera listened to the debate, their hands joined on the conference table. Through their bond, they shared thoughts and emotions, reaching decisions with the speed that only perfect understanding could provide. "There is a third option," Nythera said finally. "We demonstrate that our alliance represents strength, not weakness, but we do so defensively, not through conquest." "What do you propose?" President Park asked. "We evacuate the threatened worlds and establish a defensive perimeter," Do-Yun explained. "Then we invite the Zephyrian leadership to meet with us on neutral ground. When they see that we won't be intimidated but also won't attack first, they'll have to reconsider their position." "And if they refuse to negotiate?" Admiral Morrison pressed. Nythera's voice carried a hint of her old imperial authority. "Then they will discover that love does not mean weakness, and that a united galaxy is far stronger than they imagined." The strategy worked perfectly. Faced with the combined fleets of Earth and the Velian Empire, plus a dozen other worlds that had joined the new alliance, the Zephyrians agreed to peace talks. "Your empire spans half the galaxy," their leader, War Chief Thane, said during the negotiations. "Why do you not simply conquer us?" "Because conquest creates enemies," Nythera replied. "Partnership creates friends. We prefer friends. But you could force us to submit." "Yes," Do-Hyun said simply. "But then we'd have to spend the next century watching our backs, wondering when you'd rebel. This way, we can focus on building something better together." Thane studied the human for a long moment. "You are either very wise or very foolish." "Probably both," Do-Hyun admitted. "That's what makes it interesting." The Zephyrian leader actually smiled at that. Within a month, they had signed a non-aggression pact that would eventually grow into full membership in the alliance. 2 years after the wedding, Nythera made an announcement that shocked the galaxy again. She was pregnant. "Is that even possible?" Dr. Minji asked during a private family dinner aboard the Eternal Throne. "The bonding process created genetic compatibility," Nythera explained, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Our child will be the first true hybrid of our species." "What will that mean for them?" Do-Hyun asked, wonder and worry mixing in his voice. "They will carry the best of both worlds," Nythera said confidently. "Human adaptability and creativity, Velian wisdom and longevity. They will be the bridge between our peoples." "Poor kid," Minji said with a grin. "No pressure or anything." The pregnancy became a galaxy-wide celebration. Scientists from dozens of worlds collaborated to ensure both mother and child remained healthy. Artists created works inspired by the coming birth. Children on Earth and Velian worlds drew pictures of what the baby might look like. When their daughter was finally born, the galaxy held its breath. She was beautiful, with her father's warm brown eyes and her mother's silver skin. Her hair was dark like Do-Yun's but seemed to shimmer with inner light like Nithara's. "She's perfect," Do-Yun whispered, holding his daughter for the first time. "She's the future," Nithara said, tears of joy streaming down her face. They named her Hope in both languages, Huimong in Korean, Lithara in Velian. 5 years later, little Hope took her first steps in the gardens of New Unity, watched by parents who had accidentally revolutionized the galaxy by falling in love. "Mama, look!" Hope called out in her mixed language of Korean, English, and Velian. "The flowers are singing!" Indeed they were. The hybrid plants that grew in New Unity's gardens had been designed to respond to emotions with musical tones. Hope's laughter made them chime like bells. "She's going to be trouble," Do-Yun said fondly. "The best kind of trouble," Nithara agreed, still blushing when her husband kissed her cheek after all these years. Around them, the galaxy they had helped reshape continued to grow and change. The alliance now included 47 different species, all working together to explore new worlds and solve old problems. "Do you ever regret it?" Do-Yun asked as they watched their daughter play. "Giving up absolute power for all this chaos?" Nithara considered the question seriously, then smiled. "Power is meaningless if you have no one to share it with. I traded an empire for a family and got a better empire in return. Plus, you get to see new worlds, meet interesting aliens, and occasionally prevent galactic wars. Plus, I get to wake up every morning next to someone who thinks fixing a broken hyperdrive is romantic." It is romantic, especially when you help. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their daughter discover the wonder of a universe where anything was possible. The former Ice Empress and the maintenance engineer had proved that love could indeed conquer galaxies, one heart at a time. And somewhere in the vast cosmos, on worlds they had never seen, other unlikely couples looked up at the stars and dared to dream that they too might find their perfect match among the infinite possibilities of space. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but the greatest wonder of all was that in all that immensity, two hearts had found each other and changed everything.